Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. I am covering a case today that you have really hammered me for. It's the case of Virginia McCullough, Diane Downs, Katherine Knight. We are covering a highly requested case yet again. This is a case of Diane Downs. I hate this woman. I hate her. I hate her. I hate her. I hate her and her little mushroom haircut that she gets. I hate her. This woman is just like the epitome of evil. This woman just really, she's climbing that ladder. Like, she is trying to take the pinnacle of evil prize. But Diane Downs, she loved the boys. She really loved the boys. And when one boy in particular doesn't want to be with her, he takes the cowardly way out and says that her children is the problem. You know, her children, they're baggage. They are strings attached that he does not want, and therefore he can't be with her. When really he didn't want to be with her because she was a complete and utter fruitcake. Diane Downs, what she would do to be with a man she thinks that she loves. This evil, horrific monster of a woman, she would attempt to murder all three of her children just to try and get with a man who didn't even want to be with her. Now, as usual, before we get into this case, please make sure you leave a comment down below. It can be an emoji, it can be a question, it can be slander about Diane Downs. That is very much welcome. Or it can just be a generic comment, whatever you like. By commenting down below, it really does help boost my engagement, really pushes me out to the YouTube algorithm, which I so desperately need. I want to do this full time so bad. Like, I just, honestly, the amount of content I would create if I was doing this full time, unbelievable. And like the things I want to do, I want to help people. A couple of weeks ago, right, before we get into this, the case of Willie Francis, if you've not watched it, you absolutely should. It was a young black boy who was executed twice for a crime that there was no proof he even committed, and there was actually proof pointing to the police committing it. Listen, I've reached out to Nancy Grace. I've reached out to the lawyers of George Stinney. I'm in the UK, right, but I'm trying to contact America because this young boy needs to be exonerated. I'm writing letters in my free time. I'm so passionate about this, it is unbelievable. My begging's done. Without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the case of Diane Downs. So I've added spider webs. What do we think? There is spiders in them, but you can't see it because like the background blur. Kinda like it, but Steve, the channel mascot, has been covered up, and like I feel guilty, but low-key it looks good. Also, I cannot believe I forgot to show you this in the last video. I have a huge Chucky doll, and like he literally has a weapon, like a weapon. Like he could kill me in my sleep. He doesn't, he's great, but I really feel like he should be up here somewhere, but he's just that big. Like, look, he's got shoes and stuff. Phenomenal. I need one in every horror character. But I'm also like perspiring profusely, but we'll just say it's like a bit of added glow for the makeup. And honestly, see, for this case, I was like, let me roll up my mother sleeves, because this woman, I want to punch her in the face so bad. Her and her bad mullet haircut from back in the day. So Diane Downs, she was born on August the 7th of 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona. And she was born to Danish and English American parents by the name of Wesley Linden and Willadine Fredrickson. Fredrickson was the surname, so she was Diane Fredrickson before she was Diane Downs. Wesley and Willadine, oh, love that. Is that like alliteration there? But Wesley and Willadine, they would marry in 1954, and then Diane Downs came into the picture not too long after. Now, Wesley, as a parent, he was described as being very arrogant, very criticising, very aggressive. Like, in this household, no one could do right in the eyes of Wesley. Like, he was God and everyone else was just like these little minions who had to do what they were told. He would set up like really strict, insane rules in the household, and it did seem like he had full control over Willadine. Like, the woman wouldn't pass wind without asking for permission. Apparently Wesley, he had a big problem with Willadine spending any time with Diane. It was kind of like he got jealous whenever Willadine wanted to, bond with their own child. It's given mommy issues. Like, Willadine, what do you mean you want to spend time and look after your newborn, defenceless, depends on you completely little child when you've got your husband here? A full grown ass man who still needs you to cut up his steak and take the peas out his vegetables. Diane at one point, right, she tries to say that her father abused her from a very young age, like around 12 years old. And she claims that she believed this was the reason that Wesley didn't want Willadine spending that much time with Diane, in case she maybe noticed anything was wrong, like any injuries, any bruises, you know. But weirdly, later, Diane would completely take this statement back. She claimed that it was just a lie. I made it up. No harm, no foul. And obviously Willadine and Wesley, they completely denied these allegations as well. So Diane's family was formed of very strict conservatives with a lot of different rules in place, strict rules, that would align with their values. And of course, Willadine and Wesley, they expected that Diane should align with their values and follow their rules. In school, Diane, she was not allowed to wear makeup. She wasn't allowed to dress fashionably. And as you can imagine, being at school, bullies had a field day with this. They would bully Diane. They said that she looked like a 1950s housewife whilst they're all swanking about in the best of gear. And she looks like some kind of old matron. Age 14, Diane decides, I'm going to rebel. I'm going to do what I want when I want, and no one, Willie and Wesley, is going to tell me what to do. So Diane, she goes through this really rebellious phase at the age of 14, which, if I'm honest, is not too alarming. We've all been there and done that. Sorry, mum and dad. So while she was a freshman at Moon Valley High School, she started dressing like a full-grown woman, and she would only date older boys. And one of these older boys that she would date would be Stephen Downs. And immediately, once they're together, they do become like this inseparable couple. It really seemed like they loved each other. Now, Willadine and Wesley, when they met Diane Downs' newest piece, Stephen Downs, they weren't a fan. Like, from the offset and throughout, they were not a fan at all. They thought Diane was too good for him, which, like, and they also believed that he did not align with the family values. But then again, neither did Diane. Match made in heaven. But of course, little Diane Downs, she is a complete rebel at this age, and she decides that she is going to continue this relationship with Stephen Downs. So they go through high school together and they end up graduating together as well, still having this really close, like, inseparable bond. But there would be a slight spanner in the works when Stephen, he would enlist in the US Navy, which of course meant that he would have to move away for his work, leaving Diane behind. So with Stephen going away to the US Navy, Diane's thinking, you know, I could use this time to be productive. So she would join the Pacific Coast Baptist Church College, and this was in Orange of California. But as you can probably imagine, this just wasn't the right environment for Diane. You know, it's not a place that she would thrive, and less than a year later, she would be expelled for promiscuous behaviour. Yeah, she was a little promiscuous one, her. Now, because of this expulsion, this meant that she had to return home and live with her parents, which she desperately did not want to do. In 1973, the Lovebirds, Stephen and Diane, they were reunited, and it was just like magic. They vowed that they would never be apart again, no matter what it took. So on November the 13th of 1973, Diane and Stephen, they decide to get married. Wedding bells, people. It was just a wholesome, gorgeous, sunshine and rainbows moment. But it wasn't really, because Diane would reveal that she didn't in fact marry Stephen for love. She married Stephen so she would have an excuse to leave home. She didn't actually want to be with Stephen, but he'll do for now. He gets her out the house. So outwardly, as it always is in these cases, Diane and Stephen, they appeared to be a normal, somewhat happy couple to the public eye. They didn't tell anyone else about their struggles in their relationship, but my God, behind closed doors, these two practically hated each other. Like, kind of despised each other, to be honest. They would constantly argue. They always argued about financial worries, financial stresses, which of course can put pressure and stress on any relationship. But there was also a lot of arguments regarding infidelity. particularly from Diane. Despite all these arguments at home, Diane thinks to herself, do you know what? I really want to have a baby, and I don't really care if Stephen wants a baby, because like, I want one, so we're going to have one. So Diane does not talk to Stephen about this, doesn't say what her plans are. She one day just stops taking her birth control and they start having unprotected sex. And voila, would you know it, this is how babies happen. Sex ed with Anna and Steve. So Diane soon falls pregnant, tells Stephen. He's low-key shocked because thought you were taking stuff for that, but okay. So Christine Ann Downs, she would be born on October the 7th of 1974, and she would later be better known as Christy. And Christy, she would be the oldest of the Downs children, because believe it or not, Diane is gonna have more. And then on January the 10th of 1976, would you believe it, another baby pops out of Diane, and that would be Cheryl Downs. At this point, Stephen's thinking, I can't trust this woman for love nor money. Like, we've discussed this, she was meant to be back on birth control. But Diane again, out of the blue, decides she wants another baby, and who cares what Stephen thinks? I'm just going to stop taking birth control and see what happens. And when talking about Diane later on, Stephen would say that Diane was the only woman he knew that would get pregnant just to cheer herself up. Having a bad day? Get pregnant, why not? And honestly, do you know what sickens me is, we'll get into this, right, but I just want to say it now, it really sickens me that there are women out there who are desperate to be mothers but cannot get pregnant, no matter how hard they try, no matter what treatments they go through. Some women just cannot get pregnant, whether it's medical issues or, you know, if it's something to do with their health that they really shouldn't get pregnant, like if it put them in danger. Then there's women like Diane Downs who gets pregnant so bloody easily and doesn't even want or care for her children. It infuriates me. So after the birth of Cheryl, Stephen decides, like, I cannot trust this woman to take birth control. I can't trust her to tell me the truth. So I'm going to get a vasectomy, which should hopefully stop any more children from arriving. Now, Diane, she would end up pregnant again at this point from Stephen, so she claims. But this child, for some reason, she decided to go ahead and terminate this baby. However, she would go on to have another child, but her third child would be the result of an infidelity with a colleague by the name of Mark Sager. On the 29th of December 1979, Diane Downs would give birth to her youngest son, Stephen Daniel Downs, but he's better known as Danny. He went by his middle name. And by the time Danny was born, he wound up being born into a very, very unhappy home with Stephen and Diane on the brink of a divorce. Like, they hated each other's guts. And it would be revealed to Stephen that he wasn't Daniel's father. And although he tried to accept Danny as one of his own, he couldn't see past the infidelity that Diane Downs had committed. The couple then divorced in 1980. So at the time of the divorce, Diane Downs, she was only 25 years old, and let's just say she wasn't Mother of the Year, right? And it's not like a struggling single mum who's doing her very best. Diane Downs just didn't care to try her best. She wasn't really wanting to give her best to these children. And Stephen Downs, he even said that Diane Downs did not give a single crap about their children. He also said for someone who enjoys being pregnant so much, she doesn't enjoy raising the child, which, yep, we're getting into it, but absolutely 100% agree. Now, Diane Downs, she is a woman that does not know how to be alone. So she would spend the next couple of years bouncing from man to man, quite literally. She would move in with one, and then she'd move out, and then she'd move in with another one, and she would move out. And in between all of this, she's desperately trying to reconcile with Stephen because, surprise, surprise, Diane Downs does not want to work. She wants someone there providing for her. Why should she have to get a job? She is a mother of 3 children. She needs help. Well, you need help if you were actually raising your children, but considering the fact that they were deemed to be malnourished, I highly doubt you were trying. So at this point, Diane Downs is thinking, you know, money's starting to get a bit tight around here. Can't seem to buy myself my luxuries that I want. Never mind the children though, just me. Can't afford the stuff that I want. So she's thinking, I might have to get a job. The time has come. And her job she wanted to be a surrogate, which, don't get me wrong, surrogacy, amazing, such an amazing thing that you can do for people who want children. Absolutely love that. But someone like Diane Downs, I'm not so sure. But yes, this is Diane Downs' perfect plan to, get some financial gain. She's going to be a surrogate. She'll give birth to these babies and then hand them over to the couples who request her as their surrogate. Is that how it works? I'm not entirely sure. But Diane Downs would not be able to become a surrogate because she would fail 2 of the psychiatric tests that you need to pass, 2 separate ones for 2 potential mothers. And one of these exams actually indicated that she was psychotic. Now, Diane, finding out she was, deemed to be psychotic, you would think that she would be a bit bothered by this. But no, Diane, she brags to her friends like, I'm psychotic. Finds it hilarious that she's psychotic. So at this point, Diane's surrogacy dreams, they're not coming true. And she decides, I might actually have to get a job. Can you believe it? Poor Diane's having to work. So in 1981, Diane would start her job as a postal carrier in Arizona. And of course, whilst you're working, you're going to need to set up some childcare. So children would be sent to various family members to watch whilst she worked. But it is said, even when she was finished her shift, she wouldn't exactly rush home to pick up the children. She would take some more time for herself and pick them up whenever she felt like it. So not too long after this, neighbours are starting to, raise some concerns regarding the treatment of the Downs children. Neighbours had reported that the Downs children, they were constantly hungry. They would beg neighbours for food. And in the height of winter, they wouldn't have coats on and their shoes were just not appropriate for the weather conditions. They could tell that they were being badly mistreated by their mother. Now, neighbours had also picked up on the fact that when Diane couldn't find any childcare, she would leave 6-year-old Christy in charge of looking after Danny, who would be 1 year old, and Cheryl, who would be 4. A child looking after an even younger child and an infant. And what's really devastating as well is at one point, Cheryl, she actually goes and tells a neighbour that she is terrified of her own mother, scared to go home to her mother because she feels like her mum doesn't even like her, which is just honestly heartbreaking. This little child, this 4-year-old, is picking up on the fact that she feels like her mother hates her. She doesn't feel safe with her mum, the one person, or at least the one of 2 people who your child should feel most safe with. And she doesn't. Diane's ex-husband Stephen, he would say the following statement about Diane regarding the treatment of her children. So Stephen said, Diane forbade everything to the children. If Danny demanded a little attention, she rejected him. But the worst was one day I caught Cheryl jumping on her bed and I told her that that was not allowed. I made her sit down and think about what she had done. Bit extreme, by the way, but it is what it is. Can be dangerous, I suppose. Cheryl remained calm while looking up and asked, is there a gun here? I replied that no, and I wanted to know the reason for this question, to which she told me, I want to kill me. My mom says I'm bad. Can you imagine that coming out of your child's mouth? They actually want a gun. They even know what a gun is and what a gun does, and they want to shoot themselves because their mum says that they're bad. Their mum has made them feel so terrible and so worthless at that age, the age of 4, that they want a gun. I need to just remain calm because, well, I've still got a lot of this case to cover. So despite the horrific and monstrous treatment of her own children, somehow later this year, Diane would be accepted into the surrogacy programme. Don't know how she passed that test. I'm not going to question it, but apparently she did. And Diane would earn $10,000 for carrying a baby to term and then surrendering this baby to adoptive parents. And it was within this time period that Diane Fredrickson now at this point, she found herself a new love interest. And this was a colleague by the name of Robert Knickerbocker. And he goes by the nickname Nick, so we're calling him Nick. So, Diane's new hunk of burning love, Nick. He was actually married at the time that him and Diane had started this affair, and he even had his own children at this point, right? And he's having an affair with bloody Diane Downs. Like, get some standards. Anyway, they're having this good old time, but Diane seems to want something more serious, and Nick's thinking like, whoa, let's pump the brakes on this love train because I want to get off at the next stop. This is getting too serious. I don't want to be a daddy to your children. And when Nick was looking for the perfect excuse to break up with Diane, he would use the children as that excuse. Don't be such a wimp, Nick. Just tell the psychotic woman that you do not want to be her lover anymore. So in April, desperate Diane, she moved herself and her family to Springfield, Oregon. Now, naughty Nick. Naughty Nick tells her, I'm gonna divorce my wife. As soon as that divorce is finalised, I'm going to come and join you and the kids in Springfield, Oregon, and we'll make a go of it and live a nice happy life. So Diane, she's like trying to put down roots here, so she gets herself a postal service job again, and just as she is settling into life in Springfield, Oregon, Nick would get in contact. So Nick, he tells Diane that her children, they make the affair feel like there's just too many strings attached. It's suddenly too serious. Like, he was just in it for a good time, not a long time. He was in it for the casual sex, not to run a daddy daycare centre on his days off. So Nick basically says that he views the children as baggage to Diane and he can't commit to her because of this. Diane at this point is growing even more resentful of her children than what she already was, because she believes that her children are the fault of this relationship breaking down. So Diane Downs' way of thinking in this moment in time is like, how am I ever going to find love if I've got these 3 bags attached to me, meaning her children? Because at the end of the day, that's how she views her children, as baggage. And I'm sure any mums out there, and I know I've got you because some of yous have just had babies. Sorry, I'm getting off topic, but it makes me really happy. Shout out to all the little new true crime babies in the community. But I know so many of you out there will think, you know, if a guy said that to me, if they were saying that my children was baggage or too many strings attached, you'd be like, you. You would tell them where to go. You would not put up with that. Most healthy adults realise and just feel that their child is their whole entire world. But as we know, there are a few rotten eggs on that farm. They're not all organic and fresh. There's a few rotten ones. There's a lot of rotten ones. So at this point, Diane's children are like suffering from starvation. They are malnourished at this point. But all Diane cares about is writing in her stupid little diary about Nick, the affair, how it ended, her children being the issue, like as if that's her only flaw. Like, babe, are you okay? Look in the mirror, take a self-reflection class because you are the issue. Now listen, we've probably all heard someone say that they would do anything for the person they love. They would kill for the person they love. They would do anything to be with that person. I mean, we've seen it in the Cinnamon Brown case, not in that way, but the fact that she would have done anything for her dad because she loved him so much. But there has to come a time where that person thinks, how far would I actually go for this person? What are they truly worth? And for Diane Downs, Nick, he was worth murdering her own children in the hopes and in the pursuit that she might be able to win Nick back. No guarantees, but my God, is she going to try? So we're now going forward to 10:48 p.m. on May the 19th of 1983, when a red Nissan sports car would pull up in front of the Mackenzie Willamette ER. Now, a young woman would scramble her way out of the driver's seat front door, screaming, "Help, someone's killed my kids." This woman seems frantic, she's kind of distraught, she's begging for help. This looks like a woman in complete desperation. Now, horrifically, in this red Nissan sports car, there would be 3 children covered in blood because they had been shot at close range. Horrifically and devastatingly, 7-year-old Cheryl, she was already dead when she had arrived at the hospital. And the other 2 children, Christy and Danny, they were barely hanging on for life. Like, they were clinging on. But honestly, it was like a 50-50 of whether they would make it or whether they would also lose their life. So at this point, 8-year-old Christy, she has actually suffered a stroke due to severe blood loss, and 3-year-old Danny, he was now paralysed after receiving a bullet to his spine. And suspiciously, Diane Downs, the mother in need, the desperate mother who wants her children to get help, she has a minor gunshot wound on her arm. That's weird. Hey, like, that's really weird that our children are hanging on for life and one has actually passed away, being murdered, and she only has a really minor gunshot wound to her arm? Weird. So Diane Downs in the hospital, she starts telling, the hospital staff that she and her children have been a victim of a carjacking gone wrong. And like, they say gone wrong, but what's really right about a carjacking? Like, that never really makes sense to me. Like, how can it go wrong when it's already wrong? So Diane Downs, she claims that this carjacking took place on a rural road in Springfield where this dishevelled, bushy-haired man just came out and attacked them. So Detective Doug Welch of the Lanes County Sheriff's Department, he comes over to question Diane about, what had happened that evening, what exactly took place, just get some details, get a description of the perpetrator, the man who has just murdered and attempted to murder her and her children. Now, when Diane starts talking to the police and things get very animated, this is when police and hospital workers become very suspicious that her story doesn't quite line up. She's acting a bit shifty. So Detective Doug Welch and also the hospital staff, they said that Diane was far too calm. Her manner, her demeanour was just not appropriate for someone who's just been in such a traumatic incident, who has just lost one of her children with her 2 other children in life-threatening condition. She was not acting in that manner. You'd think she was there on a wee 1-week holiday. And not only was she acting weird, but some of the stuff she was saying was just so goddamn out of pocket that they were like, there is no way that her story's true. So Diane Downs, right, she claims that evening she was on her way back from a friend's house and she decides to take this rural back road in Springfield, Oregon, a place that she's not even that familiar with, and she decides that she is going to go sightseeing. At night time, in the pitch darkness. Diane, unless you are bringing night vision goggles with you, I don't think you're going to see much. So on this sightseeing journey, Diane Downs, she looks in her rear view mirror and she can see that all the children have fallen asleep in the back seats. So she's driving along and Hungry Like the Wolf, that song, Hungry Like the Wolf, that comes on and she's driving along this really dark rural road where she sees a man sort of like flagging in the middle of the road. He's got really bushy hair and he looks like he needs help. Now, this was around 10 p.m. She has sleeping children in the car. She's a tiny woman. She's on a dark road and a shaggy-haired, bushy-haired man flags her down. Would you stop for that with your children in the car? Let me know. So Diane Downs, Mother of the Year, right? She decides to slow down, pull up alongside this shaggy-haired man. She turns off her car, takes her keys out of the ignition and jumps out to see what's wrong. I just need to interject here, right? Because if I ever am driving my car late at night on a rural dirt road, or any road for that matter, right, and you're trying to flag me down, making out that you need help, I'm gonna drive by you. I'm sorry, I might shout out my window to you like, don't worry, I'm phoning the police. I'm gonna call the police to come and check you out. Like, I'm not gonna come check you out. And the thing is, you can't trust anyone these days because people put babies' car seats on the side of the road, or babies' prams, or they have like baby dolls that cry to make you get out your car to see what's wrong. And then they catch you, and then they murder you, or do some dodgy stuff with you, and I don't want to be a victim of that, and neither should you. So if ever you're driving and you see someone that looks like they need help, drive by, shout out the window if you must, but even that's a risk. Phone the police and let them deal with it, because not your circus, not your monkey. That's what I say. Like, you just never know people's intentions, so do not ever take that risk. Like, it might sound bad, but even if you look injured, if I can see like blood and stuff like that, I'm still going to be side-eyeing you, and it would take a lot for me to stop, unless you were like Alison Botha. You know what happened to Alison Botha? Yeah, okay, I'd pull over then because I can see quite clearly that you're very injured and I would want to help. But if you're just flagging me down, I'll get you help. but I'm not going to be your help. So anyway, devious Diane, right, hops out the car, asks the man, like, is everything okay? And the man just point blank says, I want your car. My response would be to try and run to my car and, you know, get away with my children safely. Diane says, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Huh? So Diane then says that this shaggy haired man, he shoves her out the way, like shoves her to the ground. He then runs over to the car, points the gun into the car and starts shooting the children in the back seats. Now, whilst this is going on, Diane, the hero, right, mother of the year yet again, she says that she was trying to distract him, so she pretends to throw the car keys away into a bush, and then when he's distracted and like trying to look for them, she shoves him out of the way, jumps into the driver's seat and drives like a lunatic to the nearest hospital. We will later find out she was driving at a snail's pace.
I stopped and got out and asked him what was the problem. And he said, I want your car. And I said, you gotta be kidding. I mean, how many people really do that in real life? They don't.
Now Diane, of course, she's got her little wound and she says that she had gotten this during the scuffle with the man. He had like shot her to try and get her away. Oh, and also a really important fact that Diane wanted the police to know, so like I'll have to tell you because quite clearly it's important. Hungry Like the Wolf, that was playing throughout this attack, throughout this scuffle, the shooting. It's like something at a movie. Like the way she's like acting this out and being so animated as if she is like a child telling this really elaborate lie. Like those children at school who just BS all the time and make out that these mad things happen to them. Like Jay from The In-Betweeners, if you're from the UK, if you've ever watched that, you'll know exactly what I mean. But he just tells lies upon lies and they're the most outrageous lies that you know the person's lying. This is Diane Downs. Now police, just to be on the safe side, they're like, well, we better put out an APB for this bushy-haired man, right? That's all they had to describe him by, an APB for a bushy-haired man. At this period in time, that could have been many, many men. My God, like leave them alone. And even though they put out this APB, the police and hospital and anybody else who hears the story, they're just not convinced by Diane Downs. Police are thinking, first of all, who goes sightseeing in the dark? Just like I thought. Who the hell goes sightseeing in the dark? Unless you're going to go look through like a telescope at the stars, I'm not buying it. And second of all, who the hell pulls over for a creepy man in the distance, unbrushed haired, bushy as anything, who's flagging you down to stop in the middle of nowhere? No one. So police immediately, right, they're already seeing all these red flags. The first one that was really big for them was the fact that when Diane Downs got to the hospital, right, bearing in mind she said she drove like a lunatic, jumped in her car, went right to the hospital. But when she arrived at the hospital, her wounded arm had already been bandaged up. Where did you find time for that? And the other thing is that her right arm was incredibly clean and spotless despite the mass amount of blood that was inside that vehicle. How does that happen? Have you washed it in a burn? Now, police had also stated that Diane was very emotionally flat. She didn't really have much reaction to the fact that she was in this really traumatic incident and that 2 of her children were in life-threatening danger and 1 of her children had even died.
I just kept saying, God, do what's best. You know, if they gotta die, let them die, but don't let them suffer.
She had no reaction to it. There was no sadness. She was just completely unbothered. And the only thing she kicked up a fuss about at that hospital was the fact that she wanted to call her boyfriend Nick. Little quick quiz here for you, quick knowledge test. Does anyone remember why Nick said he broke up with Diane? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Was because of her children. If you said that, you got it correct. Because of her children. Her children were baggage, apparently. And Diane's trying to get back in contact with this guy now that 1 of her children are dead and she suspects that the other 2 is also going to die. So Diane, she is then informed that her son Danny, 3-year-old Danny, has been paralysed. And Diane, she's not upset or really that emotionally bothered. However, she did say that she was confused. You know, she's very confused because she would have thought that the bullet had hit his heart and no his spine. But for Diane, that was just some wishful thinking. And honestly, like, I just cannot believe this is true, but it is. When speaking to the police, Diane had also said, boy, this has really spoiled my vacation. What? And the other thing that bothered her is her car. She had even said, that really ruined my new car. It's got blood all in the back of it. And fair enough, maybe when people are in shock and they've suffered trauma, they like disassociate. But the police are like, what the? Like, Diane, did you just hear me? Your child is paralysed. Your 3-year-old child is paralysed. And she's like, no, yeah, I hear you, but my car. Like, does insurance cover that? What? Hello, is your lights on? So, now, the famous reenactment. I'm sure we all know exactly what this reenactment is. But 4 days after the attempted murder of 2 of her children and the murder of 1 of her children, Diane Downs is brought down by the Lane County Sheriff's Department to do a reenactment of the events, just so they can try and piece things together, you know, help catch that murderer. They're looking at you, Diane. Diane, she could not wait to jump out that car and reenact like she was loving life. She felt like she was in a movie. And she was about to relive what should have been the most traumatic event of her life, but she was so happy to do so. So Diane hops into the car, right, looks in the rear view mirror and starts primping her hair, making sure everything's okay, fixing her makeup, touching it up in the mirror, making sure that she is camera ready.
Sitting in the car is Elizabeth Diane Downs.
She can be seen sitting in the car and she's kind of primping, making sure that her hair looked the way she wanted it.
And at this point, the cameras are already rolling, right? So the police have got all of this on tape. So she's smiling and laughing while she's telling the story of how this attacker murdered and attempted to murder her own children and also shot her in the arm. But she's laughing and giggling away. And at one point, she bumps her cast on the car and she like giggles out loud. She says, that almost hurt more than... And this bit was really strange to the police. The police had suspected that she was actually going to say, that almost hurt more than when I shot myself. They believed that that's what was going to come out of her mouth, but she caught herself just in time.
I'm throwing the keys, okay? I'm throwing the keys.
So they can understand and get the forensics right.
I go like that. I got in the car, jumped in, put the keys in. I just hit my cast. Started the car and left. The car door shut itself. God.
She doesn't seem at all upset.
This is worse than... Okay.
So at this point, police are like, who the hell are we dealing with here? Like, we need to look into her. We are sus as hell. So they start digging into Diane's background. They would uncover some really troubling patterns from her childhood, her adolescence, and also her adulthood. So now it's a month later, right? A month after the shootings and the murder of 1 of her children. And at this point, both of her other children, they're still in critical condition. They're still in the hospital, right? But Diane, she gets all glammed up, gets herself a new hairdo, which, can I just say, this hairdo on her does her no favours. She looks like a mushroom. But anyway, she's all glammed up and she starts giving interviews to the press, you know, the media, talking to them, laughing and smiling with them. Diane would laugh and giggle while she spoke about this awful encounter that happened to her and this ordeal and how it affected her and this awful thing that she had encountered. One thing about Diane, right? She likes to yap more than me, more than you. She is a certified yapper, but from hell below. And within these interviews, she is always making sure that she's talking about number 1. Her. She's using a lot of like, I, me. She never ever expresses any upset about her children. She doesn't even shed a single tear. She just can't stop smiling. She's like a Cheshire cat. Now, one of the reporters, they asked Diane if she feels lucky to have survived such a horrific ordeal, and especially the fact that she only acquired like 1 minor wound that would heal pretty quick in comparison to her children, 1 who passed away and 2 who were in critical condition. Diane horrifyingly turns around to the press and says, I feel like they were the lucky ones. I mean, I haven't been able to tie my shoes for 2 months.
Everybody says you sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I had been shot the way they were, we all would have died.
So I get this right. You've got a child that's dead and 2 that are in critical condition, but they're lucky because you can't tie your own shoelace. So at this point in time, Diane Downs, she had already told the police that she doesn't own a gun. Doesn't own one, never has, never will, doesn't want one. Police at the crime scene, they find a .22 caliber casing, but there was no weapon to be found. However, when both Nick and Stephen Downs would be questioned, they confirmed that Diane did in fact own a .22 caliber gun, and police, they were then able to confirm this through purchase records. So they know she's lying about this. But why? So police, with this knowledge, they then decide that they need to search Diane Downs' house to try and locate this gun. So when they get into the house, they find .22 caliber bullets that match the casings found at the crime scene, but they don't find a weapon. And like, why would you hide a weapon or get rid of a weapon if you weren't guilty? Now, not only all of this with the gun, but also the blood spatter in the car and also the gunshot residue did not match her version of events. And to put even more of a crimp in her day and really steam her clams, there was a witness who had seen her that night. So this witness had come forward and explained that they had seen Diane Downs in her car that very night, and they actually had to pass Diane Downs because she was driving so slow, like a turtle or a snail, very slow. Now, during the search that they've conducted in Diane's house, they're also able to find her diary. And in this diary, she wrote pretty extensively about Nick. And she would write how Nick didn't want to be with her because of her children, you know, their baggage, strings attached. She spoke about how she didn't really care for her children. You know, just stuff that you would really not want the police to find when your children have just been brutally injured or killed. It was very clear to police from this diary that Diane was completely obsessed with Nick. She was pressuring him to leave his wife, but he didn't want to leave his wife. He wanted to be with his wife. This was just a fling, this was an affair, and it would end. But this isn't the way Diane seen it. She thought he was in it for the long haul. And then when police spoke to Nick, he confirms, like, Diane was so obsessed with me, she was stalking me, and because I was refusing to leave my wife, she actually threatened to murder my wife. Now, Nick had claimed that even when Diane had moved back to Oregon, she would not leave him alone. She was writing him basically every single day. And in 1983, she had tried to turn up at his house to visit him, and he was like, listen, I can't even talk to you anymore because you're so doolally, like you're a complete fruitcake, you're not all there, leave me alone. And he's saying to her, you know, I don't want kids, like I don't want to be a dad, I can't go through that again, like we just can't be together, it's not going to work. And out of everything that Nick says, Diane holds on to the children being the issue. And police at this point, they believe that was her motivation for this crime. Now, ultimately, when it came to this case, Diane Downs had dug her own grave when it came to talking to the media. The smiling, the laughing, the jokes, not showing any emotion, not caring about her children, just wanting to talk about her all the time and never ever about her children. This completely turned the public against her.
When this man shot my daughter, my first reaction was to snap back to my childhood, to the pain that had happened to me back then, my marriage, my entrapment by society. This man was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had more power because he had a gun. And I stood there and I looked at Christy reaching, and the blood that just kept gushing out of her mouth. What do you do? If I had shot my own children, would I not have done a good job of it?
And at the very start, when they heard what happened, before Diane Downs had even given interviews, they felt very sorry for her because what a horrific ordeal for a mother to go through. But the second she stepped in front of that camera, they turned against her. And the public were putting so much pressure on the police to arrest her, but they were very aware at this point, all they had was circumstantial evidence. I'd arrest her anyway, but I'm not the police. And the only real witness that they had to this crime would be Christy Downs. When the attack had happened, Danny, he was actually sleeping in the back of the car. The only one awake would have been Christy. But due to her suffering a stroke, she had trouble communicating. She couldn't speak, but she could kind of communicate in other ways. Nurses had said that whenever Diane Downs would enter the hospital room that Christy was in, her vitals would go through the roof. Her heart rate, everything, like, just went off the chart. And this signalled to the hospital that Christy was in terror. Like, she was in fear when her mum would enter the room. she was scared of her mum. And at one point, when Diane had went to, visit Christy, she actually told the nurse to pull the plug because she's brain dead anyway. Obviously at this point nurses are like, actually she's not brain dead. So the hospital, they completely refuse to take Christy off life support because they know that this little girl is a warrior and she is going to pull through, and they will find out what happened that night. And this steams Diane's clams because she can't have witnesses. Why, that she doesn't need witnesses. She's told them what happened and that should be enough. Now, 8-year-old Christy, she is an absolute warrior, like an absolute warrior. She went through really intensive mental and physical treatment, and she ultimately relearned how to speak. And as soon as she was able to speak again, the authorities had went to her hospital room and they asked her about that night, and they outright asked her, "Who shot you that night?" And she simply stated, "My mom." Now police have exactly what they need to arrest Diane Downs, and she would be arrested on February the 28th of 1984. She would be charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of murder. And she would go to trial, and this would begin in May. Also, I'm trying something new with the lip again, so give me a minute. So during the trial, prosecution, they had argued that the reason Diane had murdered and attempted to murder her children was so she could get rid of them to be with Nick, even though he didn't want to be with her. But let's be real, she's got like her own wee fantasy going on up here. And the prosecution psychiatrist, they had diagnosed Diane Downs as a narcissist. She was also diagnosed with histrionicism, which is basically melodramatic behaviour that's used to gain attention and sympathy, and she would also be diagnosed with antisocialism. Now with this, Diane Downs, she fit the profile of malignant hysteria psychopathy. Get this, right? The prosecution, they go ahead and they play Hungry Like the Wolf, Hungry Like the Wolf in court. The song that Diane Downs is claiming one of her children was murdered to and the other 2 children were nearly murdered to. They play this in court and Diane Downs is tapping her foot, bobbing her head like it's her party anthem. No traumatic response, no trigger of trauma from this song being played. She was just enjoying herself like she did the night she killed or attempted to kill her own children. And of course, most of this case would rest on 8-year-old Christy. I mean, she was the only real witness to the crime, and she testified and said that Diane Downs, her mother, had shot the 3 children before then proceeding to shoot herself in the arm. And then in June, Diane Downs would be found guilty of all 3 charges, and she would be sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years in Oregon Women's Correctional Centre. Now, shockingly, yet unshockingly, between her verdict and then sentencing, Diane Downs gave birth to another baby. She said she had met a man on her postal route and they got freaky. And then she gave birth to another child who she named Amy Elizabeth, and she tried to claim that the reason she had given birth to her child, the reason she decided to keep this baby, was because she missed Cheryl, Christy and Danny so much. I'm not buying it. Now, Amy Elizabeth, she was taken away by the state and she was delivered to adoptive parents, and apparently she has had a very good life with them. They provided her with a very happy, stable childhood, which I'm just so happy to hear, and you can read more about her life online if you want to. And then Diane's parental rights to Danny and Christy, they were terminated, and they would actually be adopted by the Lane County District Attorney Fred Hughey, who had actually prosecuted Diane Downs. How amazing is that? What an incredible man. And the story should end here, but I've just got a wee bit aftermath, okay? And this just baffled me. So on July the 11th of 1987, Diane Downs was able to escape prison by jumping a barbed wire fence. She had used her clothes to, flatten down the barbed wire. She got over the wall and she ran away. She didn't run very far. She ran 4 blocks to this man's house. This man was Wayne Cypher, and she had said, can I stay here for a bit? And he was like, sure thing, come on in. Now the next morning, Diane Downs, she went to introduce herself to her host, and instead of saying, I'm Diane Downs, she introduced herself as the girl with no clothes on. and they started a sexual relationship. What perfume does this woman wear? Because, like, I'm not seeing this attraction. The guy must have been desperate. Now, Wayne Cypher, he had claimed that after these 10 days with Diane Downs, he had fell completely in love with her. Like, he was besotted by her. Okay. Now, in Diane Downs' cell, police had found a clipboard with some stationery on it, and they were able to make out an address, Wayne Cypher's address, and they go over there right away. They raid his house. They find Diane Downs in bed wearing one of his t-shirts and boxer shorts. So police, they apprehend Diane Downs again, take her back to prison, and she was given an additional 5 years on top of her sentence. And the judge had said that he will make sure she doesn't get out of prison. Now, Diane Downs, to this very day, she still proclaims her innocence. She says that she's a victim just as much as her children. You remember, they're the lucky ones. She couldn't tie her shoelaces for 2 months. And she still remains in prison to this very day at the Central California Women's Facility. And like, I just hope to God that she gets mistreated in there. Like, I hope she gets treated real bad. People don't like child abusers, child killers, so I can only hope that, you know, someone gets their hands on her. But that is the end of today's true crime and makeup episode. I really hope you found this one interesting. It was highly requested, so I wanted to cover it. But if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Make sure you put that notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, which is 2 times every single week. In the description below you will find details of all the products used on my face today, alongside my social media handles, Instagram, TikTok. It would mean the world if you would give me a follow over there. Only if you want to. My email address is also in the description if you would want to send over your case suggestions, but you can link them in the comments below if you would prefer. Ultimately, they all just get compiled onto a big document that I'm working my way through. Before you do go though, please make sure you have left a comment on the video just to help boost the engagement and push me out to the YouTube algorithm, because as you know, I want to do this full time and I would produce some really amazing content if I had the time to do so. So please subscribe. But that is it for today's video. Please remember, be a good person, don't be a bad person, stay safe, look after each other, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! Today we are talking about Katherine Knight. If you don't already know that name, now you do, and you will not forget it after this video. Katherine Knight was a woman known for violence. She would react with violence. If she was sad, she would react with violence. And this just spiraled out of control her entire life. And it did ultimately result in her murdering one of her partners. Now, she didn't just murder one of her partners, she actually dismembered him, decapitated him, and skinned him, and then tried to serve him to his children as a meal. Yeah, this woman's sick, so you need to strap in, get ready, get cozy, maybe get a drink, but I wouldn't recommend food for this one, or at least no for the last 5 minutes. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy my videos. Put the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload. I do upload 2 to 3 times per week, new case every single time, and it's a mix. We have serial killers, we have one-off killers, we have spree killers, we have them all. We have them all. Any case recommendations, leave them down below or send them to my email up on the screen now for you. If you want to know anything that I've used on my face today, that will all be linked down below for you as well. But without any further ado, let's get into the case of Katherine Knight. So Katherine Mary Knight was born on the 25th of October 1955, and she honestly had such a turbulent, troubled, horrendous childhood. She had her mum, Barbara Rohan, who was married to Jack Rohan at the time, and they had had 4 sons together already. But when Katherine came along, she was the result of an adulterous relationship, shall we say, between Barbara Rohan and Ken Knight. At the point where Barbara had this affair with Ken Knight, they were living in Aberdeen, New South Wales, which they lived in quite a small town. And you know what it's like when you live in a small town? Gossip just gets spread round everyone. Everyone knows your business. And at this point in this small town, when people heard of Barbara's actions, they wanted her gone. Not in life, just out of their town. And honestly, I think the thing that made this scandal like so huge throughout the community was the fact that Ken Knight, who Barbara had an affair with, was actually Jack Rowan's friend and co-worker. So people were like, what the are you up to? So as I'd said, at this point, the town of Aberdeen, they want Barb gone. So Barb's like, right, okay, I will leave, but Ken, you're coming with me. If my husband's leaving me because of our affair, you know, that innocent affair that we had, then you're going to come with me. We're going to move together. So 2 of Barbara's older sons remain with Jack Rowan. Then her 2 younger sons are sent to go and live with their aunt in Sydney. So once they had moved away, Barbara and Ken, I'm sorry, it sounds like a really bad version of Ken and Barbie. Barbara and Ken and Barbara, Ken and Barb. But once they had moved away, they ended up having another 4 children together. Barbara at this point is sporting 8 kids. That's a whole lot of children. But they have 4 children together, and this does include a set of twin girls who was born in 1955, Katherine Knight being one of the twin girls. At one point I'm going to say Barbie and Ken. I know it, because it's there. When Katherine Knight was just 4 years old, Jack Rowan would end up passing away, which resulted in Barbara's 2 older sons moving in with Barbara and Ken in Tenterfield. Or, you know, Barbie and Ken. I feel like I'm starting to look like the Riddler out of Batman, but like, stick with it. Hopefully it all comes together in the end. Now, unfortunately, Ken was a very violent and abusive person to live with and be with. And it was reported that Ken would rape Barbara on several occasions every single day. And it does actually say that he would rape her up to 10 times. Now, with this going on, Barbara would confide in her daughters, so Katherine and her sister, and tell her all these intimate sexual details about what was happening to her. She would also tell Katherine and her sister how much she hated sex, how much she hated men, and just really distilled these sort of views onto her children. Now, it's worth noting that one point in the future, Katherine wanted to speak to her mum about something that she was going through. She was with a partner who was trying to get her to partake in sexual acts that she wasn't comfortable with whatsoever. And I guess Katherine maybe thought like, well, my mum's confided in me my whole life, so why can't I confide in her about what I'm going through? So she tells her mum about this guy who's wanting her to partake in these sexual acts and that she's really not comfortable with it. Barbara turns around to Katherine and says, stop complaining and get on with it. Like, I'm sorry, but didn't you just spend your daughter's whole childhood confiding in her about your sexual activities and also your sexual abuse that you were suffering? I get that you had to confide in someone, but a child is not it. Is not it. And then for that child to feel comfortable enough to come to you later in life for support and you tell her to get on with it? Nah. No. Now, Katherine did also claim that she was sexually abused on multiple occasions throughout her life, but she did state that her dad did not sexually abuse her, but it was said that her older brothers did. Now, family members and friends of Katherine's, at first they completely doubted this because they were like, her nature as a person is just giving liar. But family would go on later and confirm these claims and say that no, she was sexually abused. Now, Katherine did say that this sexual abuse would go up until she turned 11 years old. Now, growing up, apart from Katherine's own sister, she wasn't really close to any other family members apart from her uncle Oscar Knight, who was actually like a horse champion. Did I just say a horse champion? I meant a champion horseman. Sorry. Obviously, with him being the only person she was really close to out with her sister, when he committed suicide in 1969, this completely broke Katherine's heart. Like, she was devastated and it was really hard for her to move on from this. The one person that she loved and trusted was no longer here. Katherine has maintained ever since her uncle committed suicide that his ghost is still very much with her and watching over her and checking in with her. And I mean, think of what you want. Everyone else has like different beliefs, but you know, maybe if any of you ever see me pick up an eyeshadow brush with green on it again, please kindly remind me of this Riddler look that I had going on, because like, I'm worried. I'm worried for myself right now. So after the passing of Catherine's uncle Oscar, the family did move from Tenterfield back to Aberdeen, where Catherine would attend Muswellbrook High School. Now, Catherine was known for being a bit of a bully. Actually, not even a bit of a bully. She was like a really severe bully, especially to small children. It was said that she would almost enjoy terrorising them, and she really liked people to be scared from her, and people were. She was really intimidating. Now, it was said that Catherine had assaulted one little boy with a weapon, and then Catherine herself had actually got injured because a teacher had to react in self-defence when she had attacked a teacher. Catherine was also described as being like very black and white, so she was either rageful or a model student. I just can't imagine a model student coming out of Catherine, but who am I to judge? Now, Catherine had actually left school before she could even read or write. So she left school at the age of 15 to go and work in a clothing shop, and then she got herself her dream job. Guess what this dream job was? Working in a slaughterhouse. Yeah, in a slaughterhouse. She loved it. That was the dream. She loved it. And what would she be doing in this slaughterhouse? She was cutting the internal organs out of all the animals. Dream job. Dream job. So Catherine was extremely good at her dream job, and she ended up being promoted to working in the boning room, and she was actually gifted her own very set of butcher knives, which she just loved. She adored them. She hung them above her bed because you never know when you might need them. And in fact, Catherine said she wanted to keep them handy, just in case she needed them. Now, having her butcher knives either hanging above her bed or next to her bed was something that she would keep doing right up until her incarceration. I just can never imagine a situation where you go over to someone's house and it's a positive thing when they whip out their knife collection and show you it very excitedly. I would be very worried. So let's talk about David Stanford Kellett. Now, it's said that Kellett was really struggling with alcoholism due to some really traumatic incidents that happened in front of him whilst he worked at a railway. The first thing that happened was his best friend was actually killed in a shunting accident. I didn't know what this was, so when I looked it up, I thought I would just include a basis of what it is. So it's basically when you're moving trains from one line to another. He was killed whilst doing this. Now, the other incident was when he had been rescuing injured people from a school bus that had been struck by a train in Kempsey, and unfortunately in this accident 6 children had been killed, and the trauma that he experienced and suffered from that incident alone just sent him over the edge. Unfortunately, Kellett would lose his job due to his behaviour and his performance completely deteriorating after these traumatic incidents. Like, I totally get it. Mines would too. Do you know what I mean? He's just witnessed the most horrendous things. I hope at least that they maybe tried to get him help before just letting him go, but I couldn't really find that online. However, soon after, he was able to get work at the Aberdeen slaughterhouse. Who works there, I wonder? But whilst he was working there, he actually became very good friends with one of Katherine Knight's brothers. And it was also said that, like, if Kellett ever got in any fights at work, Catherine would jump in to defend him, but not just, like, argue. Like, she would jump in, fists up, ready to go. Catherine was also very well known for, if someone upset her, she would automatically resort to violence, no questions. Nothing. She would just jump right in with the fists. It's probably no surprise, but David and Catherine did wind up getting married in 1974. To enter their wedding ceremony, Catherine really wanted them to ride in on a motorbike, specifically her motorbike. So on their wedding day, they arrive, Catherine's driving the motorbike, and then David's riding bitch, like on the back seat. That to me sounds funny. Is that judgment? That's judgmental. I'm sorry, it's not funny. It's not funny. Now, it is worth saying that even when they just pulled up to the wedding, they were both drunk as a skunk, like steaming drunk. And later that night, Catherine would actually try to strangle David whilst he slept. I was thinking, you know, a wedding day, happiest day of your life, why would you end up wanting to strangle your new husband? Turns out, David had the audacity to fall asleep after having sex only 3 times. Only 3 times. A lot of people don't even have sex on a wedding night because they're so tired, but 3 times? Katherine wanted at least 5. Although it could be said that Katherine just wanted to start as she meant to go on, because this whole marriage that they had was based on abuse, mostly from Katherine's side, so she was just starting the wedding the way she wanted the whole relationship to be. Now, Kellett arrives home late one night because he had actually got into the final of like a darts competition, so he's buzzing to get in, tell Katherine all about it. Katherine, she ain't having any of it. You're late. You're late. So when he got home, greeted by Katherine, not feeling like a loving wife, she had burned all of his clothes, threw away all of his possessions, and then proceeded to hit him over the head with a frying pan. Now, when I read this, I cackled. I thought it was hilarious because I was just picturing like Rapunzel when she hits Flynn Rider with a frying pan, but apparently it was quite serious. Like, he had to go over to the neighbour's house and get help. Like, his neighbours had to take him to hospital, and then it was found out that he had a severe skull fracture. So Rapunzel all this time was abusing Flynn Rider quite the bit with the frying pan. However, obviously Katherine loves him, adores him, convinces him not to press charges, and he doesn't. Now, moving on to May of 1976, Katherine has just given birth to her and Kellett's daughter, Melissa Ann. Now, after the birth of Melissa Ann, Kellett actually moved to Queensland to be with another woman. Katherine, devastated, right? Absolutely devastated. So she's out with Melissa Ann one day, like pushing her in the pram, and she's seen like violently like pushing it, and then she actually goes to throw the pram. People see this and report her, and then she was admitted to St Elmo's Hospital in Tamworth, basically for her mental health. Like, she was really struggling, and I don't know if it was maybe like postnatal depression or postnatal psychosis, like something pretty serious to make her do that. And I do genuinely believe at this point that she was just in desperate need of some help. So then several weeks later, Katherine is released from the St Elmo Hospital, and she's out again with Melissa Ann, pushing her in the pram. And this time she takes Melissa Ann to a railway track and lays Melissa Ann on the track. Yeah. She then goes into town and steals an axe and goes around threatening to murder like several people that are local in the town. Luckily, there was one man who was able to find out where Melissa Ann was. He went to the railway track, he was able to save her. I think the train was late, or it was due a couple of minutes later, so he got there like just in time. Thank God. After this, Katherine was again admitted to St Elmo, but said to have a very speedy recovery because she was able to just sign herself out the next day. And that was it. So, days later, after this, Katherine sets off to find Kellett, right? So she's on her way. She's like, I'm bringing this guy back home, whether he wants to or not. So she sets off to find him, and she slashes a woman's face randomly because she demanded that this woman take her to Queensland to find Kellett. The woman refused, obviously, like, she doesn't know who Katherine is or who Kellett is. And then Katherine actually goes on to threaten to murder the mechanic who fixed Kellett's car before he left, because in her mind, this mechanic was the reason he was able to escape. So the police do wind up arresting Katherine at this point, and she was sent to a mental institution. And I guess because what's been going on has been so severe, they did notify her mother-in-law of the events that have transpired. So Kellett's mum, Katherine's mother-in-law, she then tells Kellett what's happened, and he feels dreadful because in his mind, he's what's caused this. Him leaving her has caused her to have a mental break. So he decides that he's going to go back home to Aberdeen, and he's going to be there to support his mum whilst they look after Katherine. And with him moving back to Aberdeen, he had actually split up with his girlfriend that he moved to Queensland for. Moves back for Katherine. So then on the 6th of March 1980, Kellett and Katherine, they have another daughter, and they call her Natasha Marie. And then in 1984, Katherine leaves Kellett, moves out, and first of all she goes to live with her parents in Aberdeen. Then she decided that she wanted to rent a house nearby in Muswellbrook. And honestly, when I read this, I was kind of shook because Katherine went to extreme lengths to get Kellett back, and now she's the one that's left him. Make it make sense. I don't know if it does. So Katherine had uprooted her life and she went back to working in the slaughterhouse, her dream job, the career that she absolutely loved. But a year later, she did end up severely injuring her back and she ended up claiming like a disability pension. So now she didn't need to rent accommodation close to her work. The government ended up giving her a housing commission residence in Aberdeen. So Katherine then went on to meet a 38-year-old David Saunders in 1986. A few months after they had met, he moved in with her and her daughters. Now, although he moved in with Katherine, he did make the decision to keep his own apartment. Now, listen, let's just like get it out there. This apartment was in a place called either Scone or Scone. Now, in Scotland, we would call a place that's spelled Scone, Scone. And I don't know how that would work in Australia because I was like trying to do it with an accent. I was like, Scone, 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 Scone. I don't know what sounds better because everything sounds better with an Australian accent, even though my accent is terrible, right? But I don't know, they just call it Scone, Scone. We only have to say it a couple of times, right? So bear with, we're going with Scone. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. So whenever David was not around, Katherine would get really, really jealous and start accusing him of cheating on her with other women. This would result in a big massive argument. David would go back to his apartment, Katherine would beg him to come back home, and the cycle continues. Now, just a trigger warning for animal killing here. In May of 1987, Katherine would slit the throat of David's dingo pup in front of him, and the reason that she did this was a warning to him of what she was capable of if he did cheat on her or if he did try to leave her. And then after she had slit the throat of the dingo pup, she then proceeded to knock him unconscious with the frying pan. Like, Rapunzel, take a day off, babe, this is too much. So in 1988, Katherine would give birth to a third daughter named Sarah, and with this it prompted David to put a deposit down in the house. And I know a lot of people would be like, well, he has been knocked out with a frying pan more times than I've had hot dinners, and she also slit the throat of his dingo pup. Why is he still with her? Abusive relationships are not black and white. It's not easy to just leave someone, and he was probably in fear of his life and their children's life. I mean, come on, she is capable of anything, this woman, as you'll see. So please, like, don't question why he stayed with her, because you just never know what the circumstances are really like for someone. So anyway, he's put down a deposit on this house, and then in 1989, Katherine had paid off the deposit once her workers' compensation came through. So everything could be on the up and up, but it's not. And once the deposit was paid off, Katherine was like so excited to get decorating, because now she could have her house exactly as she wanted it and just have it absolutely perfect for her. So Katherine has somewhat of an acquired taste. Not something I would go for, but she did decorate with rusty animal traps, animal skins, skulls, bones, horns, leather jackets, old boots, machetes, rakes and pitchforks. But I don't really know the vibe that she was going for, but it was very much given no animals welcome. It's the only way I can describe it. And like, we've not even heard, like, is it a bassinet? Is that a bear trap? Or does it lie on one of the animal skins? Do they cover themselves with animal skins at night? Like, unanswered questions that I really want to find out. Also worth noting that with this decoration that she had done, there was literally no space that wasn't covered, and this included like ceilings, the walls, everywhere. And of course, all items used were real animal carcass. Real skulls, real horns, real skin, everything was real. So after another argument, Katherine was pretty raging with Saunders. So she proceeded to hit him in the face with an iron and stab him in the abdomen with scissors. Yeah, just normal stuff, you know, just typical argument things that take place. So of course, after this, what's that smell? My makeup brush smells funny. I've started now. And also my cat wants out, so BRB. Right, so anyway, at this point he moves back to Scone. I don't know, Scone. He moves back to Scone, and then he returns home to Aberdeen. When he returns, however, Katherine has cut up all his clothes. We're kind of used to this by now. If you argue with Katherine, you're going to come home to no clothing garments, shall we say. David Saunders ends up going like back into hiding. Like, he is scared for his life at this point. Like, Katherine, she is just too much. And Katherine did try to find him. She was asking everyone where he was, but no one would uncover his whereabouts because I think they were all scared for him as well. Rightfully so. So David returns at one point because he really wants to see his daughter, but when he returns, he finds out that Katherine Knight had already been to the police and told the police she was scared that David was going to do something to her and to her daughter. So she had taken out an AVO, which is an apprehended violence order, which basically prohibits him from going near Katherine or his daughter. In 1991, Katherine wound up becoming pregnant by a former slaughterhouse co-worker. His name was John Chillingworth, and she gave birth the following year to a son called Eric. Now, their relationship actually went on to last 3 years until Katherine Knight left him for a man that she had been having an affair with, John Price. And this is where the story gets even worse. So John Price was born on the 4th of April 1955, and by the time he had met Katherine, he already had 3 children. So anyone who spoke about John Price said that he was a terrific guy. They actually referred to him as a terrific bloke, and he was liked by absolutely everyone. Now, his own marriage did end in 1988. His youngest daughter went with his former wife, but then his 2 older daughters came to live with him and Katherine. And at first, they really liked Katherine. Like, there was no issues at this point. But it does say that John was making a lot of money, which, good on him, great for the family, great for family life. And it was said that apart from their extremely violent arguments, that their marriage was a bed of roses. It was smooth sailing. They loved it. They just had a great time with each other. Apart from like the violent outbursts and arguments, but you know, they're just like another fly in the ointment, you know? We don't need to worry about them, do we? We do. I let this full coverage concealer dry down too long and now it's really like struggling to blend. So in 1998, Knight and Price, they have a really huge argument because Price basically just doesn't want to marry Katherine. I don't know if he just didn't want to marry her for the moment or if he was like, I just don't want to marry you, full stop. But they had this huge fight over it. So Katherine thought, well, you're not going to marry me, I'm going to get back at you. So she videotapes what was said to be stolen items from John Price's work, and she sent this videotape to his boss. He lost his job because of this, and apparently all it was like these medic kits that were like $20, something like that. Like nothing extreme, just these out-of-date medic kits. And it is worth saying that John Price held this job for 17 years and then was fired because of Katherine. Like, that's a hard thing to come back from. Because she had done this, he kicked her out the home the same day, and Katherine moved back to her house whilst the town found out what she had done to John. And she was a rather hated woman because everyone loved John. John was a great guy. He was very likeable, very nice, very kind, a terrific bloke, as people say. And this woman's came in and just destroyed his life. So a few months later, John Price does decide to give Katherine another shot and they restart the relationship under the condition that Katherine can't live with him. She's not allowed to move in with him. That's just the way it has to be. So the fighting between Katherine and John became even more frequent now that they weren't living together, weirdly. And it's so sad, but John Price's friends took nothing really to do with him in the end because of how much they disliked Katherine and they just hated her nature, how violent she was, how aggressive she was. They just didn't want to be around John if she was there. So in February of 2000, a really, really violent argument broke out between Price and Knight, and it ended up with Katherine attacking John Price with a knife and attempting to stab him in the chest. obviously when this happened, he immediately got a restraining order against her. And the idea behind this is that although he wanted to keep himself safe, he just wanted to keep his children safe. Towards the end of this month, John Price had started saying to his colleagues that he was really scared for his safety, and he said that if he ever went missing or randomly didn't show up to work one day, that it would be Catherine's fault, that Katherine would have killed him. Like, the fact that he's saying this is just like, it's awful considering what happens to him, but like, to live in that kind of fear and actually having to tell your colleagues, like, listen, if I don't turn up, you need to make sure that you let someone know that it's been Katherine. So on February 29th, 2000, John Price does return home to Katherine, and this was against his co-workers' wishes. Like, they literally begged John not to go back to her because they were scared for his safety as well, as much as he was. But he did go back because he was scared that if he never went back to Katherine, that the children would be killed. But John followed his usual routine that night. He checked in with the neighbours, kind of like just general chit chat, talking about their day, before then going to bed at 11 o'clock that night. Then Katherine did arrive home shortly after John had went to bed. She made herself dinner, she watched some TV, she had a shower, and then she headed up the stairs. And she ended up waking up John, and the two of them had sex, and then John went back to sleep. Do you remember from the start I told you that Katherine Knight always kept her butcher knives either above her bed or on her bedside table, somewhere where they would be handy if she needed them? Well, this night, Katherine grabs one of the biggest butcher knives that she has from her bedside table, and she stabs John Price 37 times. Now, it is said, according to evidence, he did wake up during the attack, and he had actually tried to get downstairs and out of the front door, but it's either like he was too weak and he's maybe collapsed, or he kind of got to the front door and Katherine caught up with him and dragged him back in before he could even go out to get any help. So it's the next day and John hasn't turned up for work. His co-workers are extremely concerned because John said to them, if I randomly don't show up one day, Katherine's killed me. So they immediately alert the police of what John said and that they're concerned for his safety. And the police obviously take this very seriously, and they head over to John and Katherine's home, and this is where they would discover one of the most horrific crime scenes ever. So it was said that hours after John Price had died, Katherine then went on to skin his entire body, and she hung the skin upon a meat hook, and it almost looked like a curtain, like a skin curtain, like you would have to go through the curtain to get into the lounge. She had then decapitated John Price and took his head into the kitchen, and the police then went on to find John Price's head was boiling in a pot on the stove with some veg. She had also cooked parts of his body to be served up with baked potato, pumpkin, beetroot, zucchini, carrot, cabbage, yellow squash, and also gravy. And they noticed that there was a note alongside the two place settings on the table, and when they looked at the notes, they were the names of his children. She had cooked John Price and was going to let his children eat him. What? And then it was said as well that there was a third plate that looked like it had been Katherine's, and it looked like she had started to eat it, but she couldn't finish it. The police had then found Katherine completely comatose after what they thought would have been like a failed suicide attempt. I think she took like a bunch of pills hoping that it would kill her, but it didn't. It just put her into like a really, really deep sleep. Now, this bit is really strange. So sometimes if you look online, there is reports that say Katherine was found lying next to John's headless body, but then there's other ones that say that Katherine had almost like propped him up with his arm over like a soft drinks bottle. So I don't know what to believe. It could be one of the two. Now, what does Katherine do when she comes to? She tells the police that she has absolutely no recollection of that evening. She doesn't remember doing anything to John. Like, Not a clue. She was comatose. What could she have done? Despite her saying this, the police very, very quickly just charged her with the murder of John Price. The fact that his co-workers and things were worried and that he had actually warned them just spoke volumes. So in October of 2001, Catherine's trial did commence, but it didn't last very long because Katherine wound up changing her plea from not guilty to guilty. So the judge adjourned the trial without testimony. Now, Katherine was escorted to prison that very same day, and the judge had wrote on her papers, never to be released. And this was the first time in Australian history that a woman had been given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Now, despite her going to prison and things like that, she does try to say that she has no responsibility for the actions that she had taken that night. This looks crazy. Let me blend that and I'll come back and tell you the rest. Yeah, so she basically still tries to say that she's innocent because she can't accept responsibility for her actions. I don't know if she's kind of going for like the whole insanity sort of thing. Now, Katherine Knight has appealed her sentence and it was denied basically instantly, like immediately. They were like, nah, you've never to be released, hon. And to this very day, she's still serving her life sentence at Silverwater Women's Correctional Centre. So yeah, she ain't ever getting out, thank God. But that is the end of another true crime and makeup episode. I really hope you enjoyed this one, or at least found it interesting. I know it's hard to enjoy when, you know, bad things are happening, but I hope it was interesting. If you have any case suggestions, please leave them down below, or you can forward them to my email if you would prefer. Put it up on the screen now for you. My social media handles will be down below, so that is my Instagram and TikTok, but ultimately just make sure you subscribe, put the notification bell on, maybe leave a like and a comment, it really helps. But I'm here for you 2 to 3 times a week with a new fresh true crime case, and we do a bit of everything here, so nothing's off limits. If you want me to talk about something in particular, just let me know. But I really hope you enjoyed, and until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye! But yeah, Virginia McCullough, evil, evil, evil woman. I don't think I can possibly ramble any more before getting into this case, so without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the case of Virginia McCullough. So before we get into the case, I have a couple of disclaimers, a few things that I would like to say. Number one, the side swoop. Ignore it. My hair has not been washed in like 5 days. I'm trying to move into a house, we're trying to decorate, we're trying to get things done. I'm stressed, I'm tired, and I don't even know how I am functioning right now. So the side swoop, don't know who I'm trying to be, but it's there. I think it's going to make sense with the makeup look that I've got planned. And just an FYI, let the record show, I am not naked. Wearing a little bandeau. So the case of Virginia McCullough. Now, let me tell you, the minute this case went like news spread over the country, over the world, you guys were flooding my comments, flooding my DMs, flooding my emails, asking me to cover her case. And I was worried because at first I was like, is there enough information? And then I went in a big deep dive. Interviews, articles, statements from family, and I've compiled quite a hefty amount about Virginia McCullough, and let's just say, I hate her. So Virginia McCullough, she was born on March the 1st of 1988, and she was born in Essex of England. Now, she was born to her father, John McCullough, and her mother, Lois McCullough. Virginia, she was the youngest of 5 daughters, so she had siblings. I'm not really sure how close she was with her siblings when she was younger, but I do know as Virginia got older, her relationship with her family became very, very strained. So I really want to make sure that this video is dedicated more toward the victims of this case. So I really want to start off with talking about John and Lois McCullough, the kind of people that they were, what people said about them. So starting off with John McCullough. John was a very dedicated educator, and my God, he was a very talented one as well. He was a retired business studies lecturer at Angela Ruskin University. Now let me tell you, his pupils raved about him. Like, he was this very, very, like I said, talented educator. People really learned from him. He was really good at what he did. The information that he told the students was told in a way that made them interested and made them retain the information. And before his retirement, he really did have a big passion for teaching. This was the perfect job for him. Like, his family could not picture him doing anything else, and I don't think John himself could picture himself doing anything else. John was also a really talented writer, and this was something that he was incredibly passionate about. He would work tirelessly. He would work why can I only speak English? Tirelessly. He would work tirelessly throughout his career. And number one, because he loved doing it. But number two, it was really important for him that he created a stable environment for his family. He wanted them to have a good life, and so he worked hard to make sure he had the money to give themselves a good life, and also him and his wife when it came to their retirement. Now, John, he was known to be a very loving and caring father. People did say that he was more a functional parent than an affectionate parent, but his children all felt love from him. Maybe to the outside looking in, he maybe seemed more functional, but his family did feel loved and adored by him. They always said that John was telling really funny jokes, like your typical dad jokes that shouldn't be funny, but they are hilarious. And when he wasn't busy making people laugh, he would love to participate in his hobbies. His main two that he really enjoyed was golf and also snooker. And honestly, I have to say, Lois and John, they seemed like a very perfect match. Like, they had so many similarities, not just in things that they enjoyed, but just the way they were as humans. Lois was known as well for being really thoughtful and caring. She really cared about her family's happiness more than she cared about her own. And her family's happiness and making sure they were okay, that was always at the forefront of her mind. Now, I will say with Lois, as much as she could make friends easily, I'd say this was more through writing letters. She had like pen pals all across the world. But in person, she was very introverted. She had a few mental health struggles that meant that she never really socialised that much with people outside. But through her writing, she felt she was able to build communication and connections with people. And she did. She had pen pals across the world, some that she was writing to for well over like a decade or even decades. So while she might struggle socially in her community, she did have her social connections that just happened to be through pen and paper. Now, another keen interest and hobby of Lois's was history. And I know a lot of us can get on board with that because we love a bit of history here. We really, really do. But she would love learning about history. She would read up on history. And she also had a very keen interest in the royal family, which I feel like so many people do. Like, whilst we're all here keeping up with the Kardashians, Lois was keeping up with the royals. Now, John and Lois, they were described as being very doting and loving grandparents. Their grandchildren was like their pride and joy. They were absolutely obsessed with them. They were so proud of them as well. Now, as well as spending time with their grandchildren, their other favourite thing to do was to go to the seaside together. They adored the seaside. They had actually spoken about moving toward the seaside in their retirement. But for them, it just had so many nice memories attached to it, and it was so peaceful. And they could really picture themselves living out their last days by the seaside together. Now, at the time of their deaths, John, he would be 70 years old and Lois was 71 years old. Now, I kind of alluded to in the start that Lois struggled with her mental health, but both of them honestly weren't in the best of health. And their daughter, Virginia McCullough, she was supposed to be assisting them and supporting them with their healthcare, making sure they got their medication, making sure that their needs were met. She had agreed to do this for them. Now, John, he had hypertension, which is high blood pressure. He also was a type 2 diabetic. He also had hypocholesteremia, which I don't think I've even said that right, but I'm guessing that's high cholesterol. Now, I know hypertension, you definitely need tablets to bring down your blood pressure. I'm not sure with high cholesterol. I don't know if that's more a diet change than it would be medication. And John, he also had glaucoma. Now, of course, for John, with these types of illnesses, he required regular checkups with his doctor and also regular prescriptions to keep his conditions under control. Now Lois, on the other hand, her conditions were more mental health related. She was agoraphobic, and if you're not aware, agoraphobia is a mental behavioural disorder that is characterised by high feelings of anxiety, particularly when people are in situations that they feel they can't escape from easily, especially when they perceive their situation to be unsafe and they feel like they're in immediate danger. Now, sometimes this can get so bad that people can't even leave their homes. Now, Lois, she was on medication for her anxiety to try and keep it under wraps. Luckily, Lois wasn't someone who was completely terrified to go outside. It did give her anxiety, but she was able to work through that and still, go to the shops, but she maybe struggled to make small talk with people. But ultimately, she was still able to live her life as much as she could. Lois also had traits of obsessive compulsive disorder, so she would get regular checkups with her doctor. They'd check that her medication was still working, and again, she would need regular prescription refills. Now, people in the community, they did know Lois and John. Despite them both being quite quiet and reserved, especially Lois, they did say whenever she was out, she was really polite, she was nice enough, but she was very quiet and shy, which is probably to do with her agoraphobia. Now, like I said earlier, she did struggle to make small talk with people, and some people could take this as her being, a bit ignorant, but it really wasn't. She just had her struggles that were going on inside, but most people did say that she was a really, really nice woman. John, on the other hand, people said that when they seen John would chat to them, but he always seemed like a man in a hurry. He was always in a hurry to get home. And if that ain't me, I don't know what is. I just watched back my last clip, right, because my dad's downstairs and he's on the phone to his friend and he's so loud. Tell me why I look like I'm the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Why am I sitting like that? But I can't sit like this when I do makeup. I need to hunch. So I'm sorry if my body looks small and my head looks big, or my body looks big and my head looks big. It's no working. So even though both John and Lois were very much reserved, they did have their daily routines, which of course is a community that's quite tight-knit. You become aware of people's routines. Like, I'm a nosy neighbour. I know some of my neighbours' routines. Like, I see them going out and I'm like, oh, there's wee Jonathan going for his morning paper, or there's wee Sandra going for her milk. You just know. And people would very quickly notice when John and Lois McCullough went missing, just when they disappeared into what seemed like thin air. And now we're going to talk about the evil monster of today's case, and that is Virginia McCullough, their youngest daughter. Virginia McCullough, she was known as having a very normal upbringing, like a really normal childhood, normal family life. And it seemed like she was brought up in quite a stable environment. However, in her early years and through her adolescence, people became increasingly aware of the fact that Virginia was very manipulative, and she also isolated herself from others. Now, Virginia, if I keep calling this goddamn woman Virginia, honest to God. For people who knew Virginia, they said that she had a very, very imaginative mind. Like, she could make up just the craziest stuff, and we all know someone like that. Like, she was a bit of a fantasist who was always adding embellishments to her stories and always making stuff up for attention. We all know this person. Now, despite these flaws, people did believe that Virginia had the potential to do really, really well in life. She was very intelligent, she was very artistic, she had even obtained her degree in fine arts. So there is good qualities in there for Virginia, and she could have been someone who did well. But ultimately, these qualities that she had that were good, which was very few, by the way, but the good qualities she had was completely overshadowed by her manipulativeness and also her secrecy. Before Virginia moved in with her parents, she was actually living independently by herself, and even when she was living by herself, her relationship with her family and her parents was still very, very strained. Her whole family noticed how deceitful Virginia was, how she always needed to lie about every single detail in her life. Like, you tell her the sky's blue and she'll tell you that it's red, and she will convince you until she is blue in the face. Things that just don't matter, things that have no reason to be lied about. she would make stuff up. Not only this, but her family recognised just how manipulative she was. She was constantly manipulating her parents to get her own way. But of course, when it's family, and especially when it's your child, you don't want to cut someone off. You want to support them and help them work through anything, which is what Lois and John would try to do. Despite some of the issues in the family, in 2015 it was decided by Lois and John that Virginia could move in and live with them. Now, she would live with them, help, support, help care for them, just support them in their day-to-day activities. And because she was doing this, John and Lois, they had agreed that while she's living there, she can live there rent-free. Virginia had convinced her family, especially her parents, that she was really working toward building her career in art. Virginia had told them that she wanted to become a professional artist and that when she achieved this goal, ultimately it would pay off for the entire family and the money would start coming in and she could help support all of her family, her parents, her siblings, herself. This is the big grand plans that she had. But of course, she never actually had these plans at all. Yet again, this is another manipulation tactic that she is using to live there rent-free while she can. So Virginia, she obviously has to keep up with this facade that she is a working professional. So she tells her mum and dad that she is a salaried web designer, which she is not. She also pretends to go into the office on some days, which she is not. Where was she going? I don't know, Asda? Now, in fact, Virginia, she had been unemployed for a number of years. I think she has a brief job as a barmaid in 2017, but apart from that, that was it. No salaried web designer, no budding professional artist, just a woman that had absolutely no intention but to take advantage of her mum and dad. Now, even though Virginia is literally living under her parents' roof rent-free, this still wasn't enough for her. And she would start to steal thousands of pounds off her mum and dad to fund her gambling addiction. Now, Virginia, she really did struggle. She had a very, very severe gambling problem. And when her money had run out, she decided to use her parents. Remember what I was saying? Her parents, especially John McCullough, if we really want to get down to specifics, he had a very, very successful career. He made money, he had savings, and his pension was honestly pretty incredible. And you can only imagine how excited Virginia was when she realised that living under their roof, she would be able to get her hands on some, if not all, of this money. Virginia, she wasn't just spending their pension money, she was actually running up huge amounts of debt. I mean thousands of pounds worth of debt on credit cards in her mum and dad's name. And to try and hide these horrific acts of betrayal towards her parents, she would forge letters and fraudulent documents from financial institutions that would state that Lois and John had been the victim of fraud and scams. Some of these letters had also said that banking failures had resulted in money being taken and not returned. Others were saying they were hacked by these professional hackers and they had took some of their money. And of course, because it's hackers and scammers, Virginia says to her mum and dad, oh, you're not going to be able to get that money back. That money's gone. You just need to live and let live, move on, no harm, no foul. When in actual fact, this evil monstrosity of a daughter was stealing her parents' hard-earned money. By the time Virginia would commit these murders, she had amassed an enormous amount of debt in her parents' names. And believe me, Virginia McCullough, she was not even close to being finished with spending and stealing her parents' money. So in March of 2019, Virginia, this is when she really starts to freak out. She's thinking, the walls are going to start closing in on me very, very, very soon, and I need to do something about this before people find out the big black hole of financial debt that I have got my parents into. And she could only think of one solution for this problem, and that solution wasn't coming clean to her parents and explaining what she had done, owning her and moving on and facing the consequences. The one solution she could think of was to get rid of her parents. No just send them away, no buy them a house in Spain, to murder her own parents. What the hell? Now, throughout this same March, Virginia, she started to accumulate a large amount of prescription medications, mostly sleeping pills, because she thought this would be the best medication to kill her elderly parents with. But not only this, in May of that same year, 2019, she would go and purchase a very, very large knife. And this large knife's purpose was none other than to murder her parents. Now, in June of 2019, just days before these murders would take place, Virginia practiced her concoction of prescription drugs. The whole reason she wanted to test it out is because she was worried that her parents might be able to taste that whatever she puts these drugs in tastes off. And she didn't want them being suspicious that she might have been trying to, poison them. Virginia decides that she's going to use her dad as a guinea pig. So she crushes up the medication and she puts it in his alcoholic beverage that he would have. Virginia gives him this drink. It's not a fatal dose in this one. It's just enough to test the waters to see if he would notice anything off. He never. He drank the drink as normal, not suspecting a thing. And this is when Virginia realised she could pull off this evil plan of hers. So on June the 17th of 2019, Virginia, she makes up this concoction of drugs in order to kill her parents. So she mixes it up in alcoholic beverages and she gives one to her dad, John McCullough. Now, this is a fatal dose, remember. And John McCullough, he would drink the entirety of this drink. Now, Lois, on the other hand, Lois is not a big drinker, so she has like a sip here and there of the drink, but she doesn't finish it, and her dose would only be enough to sedate her. Now, it is worth noting at this point that Lois and John, they didn't sleep in the same bed. They had separate beds. Some people try and say this is because they're not very affectionate, they're more functional, like I said in the beginning. They didn't want to be cuddled up next to each other every night, and some other people stated this was simply for comfort. And who can argue with comfort? Maybe John snored, maybe Lois snored, and they needed space to be able to sleep, and that's okay. So then, on the morning of June the 18th, Virginia, she went through to her father's bedroom to basically see if her concoction had worked and killed him. And when she went through, she would in fact find John McCullough lying dead in his bed. At this point, Virginia's relieved because, her plan has worked. Yay for Virginia. And she starts to panic, thinking, well, what if my mum realises that dad's dead? What if she tries to call the police? What if she makes someone aware? Now I'm going to have to deal with her. And this is when she would head through to Lois's bedroom. When Virginia walks into Lois's bedroom, she finds her mum sitting up in bed listening to music on the radio, and Virginia had thought to herself, she looks so innocent just sitting there. So Virginia, she then proceeds to go in and out of Lois's room 3 times. She herself even admitted the reason for this was so she could get the gumption to go ahead with the murder. Upon this third entrance to Lois's bedroom, this is when Virginia would suddenly grab the hammer and start bludgeoning her mother with this hammer. She said that her mum was just looking at her in disbelief when she walked into the room holding this hammer and going to swing at her. Lois couldn't believe that her own daughter could be capable of such a horrific act. And it's absolutely disgusting, but Virginia sort of explained how it felt when she was bludgeoning her mum with the hammer. She said it was as if someone was playing the xylophone badly. It was willy-nilly. What? Now, she decided because she was hitting her mum like she was playing the xylophone badly, that this was inflicting too much brutality and too much suffering to her mum. So she decides instead to go and grab the Lakeland kitchen knife that she had purchased, and she would stab her mum to death 8 times in the chest and in the neck. Virginia claimed that whilst her mum was bleeding out, she was apologising to her, apologising for doing this to her. Well, if you were that sorry, you would never have done it in the first place, or after the first hit, you would have got her help. Now, this bit in particular was just sick on so many levels to me, and this just showed to me how little she really cared about what happened, because she went back to normal real quick. Now, while she brutally murdered her mother, while she brutally stabbed her to death with this knife, Virginia got a wee cut on her finger, and this little wound wouldn't stop bleeding. And she booked an appointment with the GP, went to get it seen to, cleaned up, and had them make sure that it was okay. What? She told them that this wound was from cutting vegetables. No, you were cutting up your own mum, you sick, twisted, evil. Now, later this very same day, Virginia, she drove into Chelmsford and she went to buy plastic gloves and sleeping bags, which of course was put on her dad's credit card because she's not going to spend her own money. I mean, don't even think she has her own money at this point. And as soon as she got home, she would get to work on concealing the bodies of her mum and dad. Now, Virginia at this point doesn't have all the items that she needs to conceal her father, so she places an order on B&Q, and 2 days later this arrives. She had gotten breeze blocks, like what you use to build structures, and I don't know if you use them to build houses or something like that. She also got cement, and she had built a makeshift mausoleum in her father's downstairs study. Now, this was made up of the blocks, cement, sleeping bags. She decorated it with like her paintings and drawings, and her dad's body was stored inside. Now, Lois's body, on the other hand, had just been wrapped up in plastic bags, I think 11 plastic bags, and also the sleeping bags, and then Lois's body was just dumped in the back of her wardrobe. This here to me just signifies something deeper. I get the feeling that Virginia must have really hated her mother, because how can you build a mausoleum / tomb style thing for your dad, and yet your mum's just dumped in the upstairs cupboard in a sleeping bag in plastic bags? And it's like, even if we look at these murders together, like, don't get me wrong, they're both horrific and disgusting, horrible murders. But John McCullough, he was poisoned and then he went to bed and essentially died in his sleep. Lois McCullough, she was wide awake. She was bludgeoned with a hammer and then she was stabbed and bludgeoned with a knife. Like, it's just different levels. It's like she wanted her mum to feel pain and to suffer even more than her father. Stabbing so much just shows this aggression and rage and possible desire for revenge, which of course could indicate that there is some unresolved emotion and feelings towards her own mother. Now, I will say that Virginia would later claim that Lois had been abusive to her in her childhood. She tried to say that Lois would smack her in the bathtub when she was bathing her as a child. Virginia even referred to Lois as a happiness hoover, like she would just suck all the happiness out of the room she was in. She would suck happiness out of everyone around her. She just said that Lois was really not a good person. But her entire family was completely against this statement and says that it was nothing but a complete lie. But we'll get there. I'm jumping ahead. Now, remember what I said? Lois and John, they have 5 children altogether, 5 daughters. They have grandchildren. They have a community of people who know them and see them on a daily or bi-daily basis. And Virginia knows people are going to start realising that her mum and dad are missing, especially their own children. She's going to start doing some groundwork for a 4-year plan of what she is going to tell people about where her mother and father are. So first up, Virginia, she takes Lois's mobile phone on June the 18th and she texts a relative and tells that relative that they're going to the seaside in Walton for a week. So this buys her a week's worth of time. Now, of course, Virginia, she can't forget about number 1, and that is herself. So what she does is on June the 19th, she poses as her mother so she could obtain a new credit card and a new PIN number. After she has this, she goes ahead and does a little shopping haul for herself, gets herself some nice clothes, some nice jewellery, just really treats herself. She deserves it, Not only that, but Lois would make phone calls to relatives and to the doctors, whoever she needed to speak to, and she would pretend to be Lois. And when birthdays and special occasions came around, Virginia hopped right on Moonpig got a wee Moonpig card delivered along with a gift card or a little gift that they sell on there to cover the tracks and make out that it was coming from Lois and John. Now, if you're wondering what happened to this gambling addiction that she had, you know, that gambling that she just loved to do, this was still ongoing and it was getting worse and worse and worse. Between June the 1st of 2018 and the 14th of September 2023, Virginia had spent over £21,000 on gambling. And I'm sorry, but how can you be so bad at gambling that you spend £21,000 and you lose it all? She had nothing to show for it. I also just really want to jump in here and say that I'm not trying to like make fun of gambling addiction, because I know it is a really, really serious thing and people really, really struggle with it. Gambling is an addiction and addiction is a disease. I get that. And I know a lot of people, they will steal from their families. They will steal their money. They'll sell their possessions in order to get money to do more gambling. But I'm sorry, it would be a very, very rare case that someone murders their own mum and dad to get money to continue gambling. You have to be some sort of sick, evil, psychotic, twisted person to do that. Now, not only was Virginia continuing with her spending spree of the money that was in her parents' house and also running up mass amounts of debt on their credit cards, she was also now getting all of their pension money. Think about it, this money has been paid out in their names. She has access to all their cards, all their accounts. She was taking all this money. Now, I've got the numbers written down because I just knew for a fact that I would never remember them, so I'm just going to read them out to you right now. So Virginia would benefit from £59,664.01 from the state pension, and then £76,334.58 from John's teacher pension, and that was between the 18th of June 2019 and the 15th of September 2023. How insane is that? And it just shows you as well, like, she was with her mum and dad for 4 years before she killed them. And she had all of this money that she was just taking from them. And even in their death, she's still stealing from them. And it's like, how vile can you possibly be? Remember, like I was saying, although Lois and John, they were quite reserved and kept to themselves, they did have their daily and weekly routines, and people of the community would start to notice when they hadn't shown up in a long time, even if it was just a grocery shop or even if it was just a flubber shop. They all realised. Now, a greengrocer at Vineyard Shopping Centre near the McCullough home, there was a man who worked there by the name of Paul Hastings, and he noticed right away when Lois and John hadn't been in for a very long time, but Virginia had been. Now, Paul, he asked Virginia, you know, where's your mum and dad? I've not seen them in a while, like, how are they doing, blah, blah, blah. And Virginia tells Paul, Lois and John, they don't live in Great Baddow anymore. They moved away elsewhere. They're enjoying their life somewhere else. You'll never see them again. They're not going to come back, so like, don't look for them, Paul. And Paul was, oh, that's strange. Like, surely they would have said if they were moving away. They never mentioned it the last time they were in. But Virginia just kept up with, nah, they just decided on a whim, you know, gonna move. Virginia, by the community, she was deemed to be quite irrelevant. But she was irrelevant, but a known weirdo. She was really strange, really eccentric. And I think because she was so eccentric, she could get away with saying, like, out-of-pocket things without anyone really questioning her on it. Because anytime she said stuff, people just didn't take her seriously, because it's like, oh, there's Virginia just being the weirdo that she is. But on one occasion, she had went into Paul Hastings' shop and she had said, the police are trying to get me. They think I've killed my mum and dad. And Paul Hastings, he said, like, obviously I found this weird, but yet again, like, this is Virginia the weirdo, like, she says strange stuff. And it never aroused any real suspicion. It just made them feel like, oh, that's inappropriate. Paul said with Virginia, he would either see her constantly or not at all. There were some days where Virginia would go into the shop 4 times in one day. And then there would be other instances when he wouldn't see her for like 2 weeks. Paul had described her as being very strange and overly chatty every single time she was in the shop. She was always given more detail than what was necessary. Like, she always wanted to talk about stuff that no one really had to know about. And just in case you've forgotten, let's bear in mind that Lois and John, they both had medical conditions that they required medication for, And they also required regular checkups from the doctor. So like, how was Virginia going to get by this? Well, she would phone up the GP and pretend to be her mum. On some occasions, she was even pretending to be her dad. Don't know how she did that, but somehow she did. And whilst pretending to be her parents, like one day she's calling up to make the appointment, and then a couple of days later she's calling up and she's cancelling it, and she would keep doing this. She made so many calls to the GP. It's unbelievable. Now, sometimes Virginia would call up as herself and she would cancel the appointments on behalf of her parents, saying, oh, they're unwell, oh, they're on holiday, oh, they're actually away travelling for a period of time. And it's like, well, where's their medication? Like, they need their medication. They can't just go off on holiday and, oh, it doesn't count because I'm on holiday. Like, the GP was very concerned, but at the same time, they can't dictate what someone does with their life or ultimately if they're on top of their healthcare. Like, it's up to them. Now, the best thing... Oh God, I just pat up my hair. But the best thing for Virginia was actually when the pandemic hit in 2020, because this meant, with the restrictions in place, appointments were remotely done. They were done either by phone or by video call, and she could easily masquerade as her parents through these remote appointments. So there were some instances where she was able to keep up that pretense. And I know what you're thinking, how could she hide this from Lois and John's other children or grandchildren, whoever else was looking for them? Well, Virginia, she would tell her family just what she told the doctors, that her parents were unwell, that they were on lengthy trips, that they were moving away, that they were getting stuff ready, like just all this crazy stuff. And she was like, yeah, you can't talk to them, they're actually so busy, like snowed under. Call back next time, see if you're lucky then. And then Virginia would like make plans with the family on behalf of Lois and John, and then on the day of those plans she would cancel them, or they would just not turn up, and she'd say they're unwell, they're busy, they're going on holiday, they're going on a trip, they're going to be away for a month or two. Just wild excuses that her family were getting really suspicious of. Whilst Virginia is coming up with all these stories and narratives about where her parents are, what they're doing, why they've not been on the go recently, she couldn't help but make up some stories about herself along the way. She's like, God, if they're getting all this attention, I'm going to get some attention myself. So Virginia would claim on multiple occasions that she was pregnant. She even went as far as purchasing maternity clothes and wearing a fake baby bump, which, can I just say, must have been the cheapest baby bump she could find, because, my God, it looked fake. Everyone knew this was fake, but just Virginia being Virginia. And listen, it didn't stop there. Like, Virginia was going to the GP and she was convincing the GP that she was pregnant. And even if the GP was like, no, Virginia, you're not pregnant, like the test it's negative, hun, you're not. She'd be like, but I am pregnant. And then when that wasn't working, she would go into the doctors, say that she was pregnant but had miscarried, and would like request examinations to make sure everything was okay. Now, another thing with Virginia is, in the community, she would try and buy friends. She was always trying to buy people with gifts and food. That low-key might work on some people. I'm not going to say it would work on me, but if she showed up with like a Chinese curry, could I turn it down? Probably not. She was literally leaving takeaways on people's doorsteps, and one person had said that she left a takeaway that could have fed them for like 2 weeks, and it was such a big amount that they got a friend round to help them finish it. I'd be worried it was poisoned, but honestly, like, I get it, it's a takeaway and it's free, and yeah, those things are expensive these days. But even shop owners, like, she would show up to the shops with gifts for the owners, and these owners, like, they never found it flattering or kind, they just found it outright creepy. Now, what is absolutely crazy is from July 2020 until the very day she was caught, Virginia would make 238 calls to the Essex police. What were these calls for, you ask? I've no idea, but I've just heard it was really trivial, stupid stuff. Now, police believe that this was probably her paranoia, like her wanting to phone up and see if there was any suspicions around her, or trying to seem like a concerned citizen, so, you know, they wouldn't look at her so much if anything went on. I don't know, but it was cray-cray. And then in October of 2022, Virginia, she actually called up the police, pretending to be her mother Lois. Yep. false identity under the police, crazy. But she called up pretending to be Lois just to tell the police that her and her husband, so Lois and John, had been staying with multiple different relatives and friends. Now, I think the reason she did this was like a pre-measure, just in case anyone had reported them missing, and then the police could say, oh no, like Lois called up, they were just staying with family and friends, like they're okay, we've heard from them. Which I think that in itself is suspicious. Is it just me? I don't know. And honestly, like, it just doesn't get any crazier than this, right? But on August the 18th of 2023, Virginia McCullough phoned the police, asked them to come over to her house so she could give like a description and a statement about an assault that happened to her in her own back garden. Now, of course, this assault, it was fake, it never took place. But when the police showed up, she willingly invited them into the house that stored her mum and dad's dead bodies. She invited them in, gave the statement, told them what happened. She even showed them the little marks on her faces, which just looks like she had very lightly slashed her own face. And Virginia, she was continuing this evil charade, like she was dedicated to the act. I would do this for like one day and be like, do you know what, arrest me, I can't do it anymore, I'm tired. But Virginia, like, she was keeping up with this. She would text family members on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, letting them know how her and John are getting on, you know, pretending to be Lois, saying that they can't visit this week, but they can maybe visit next week, and then texting them and cancelling. You know how some people get described as trigger happy when they're too quick to like shoot a gun at someone? Virginia was like trigger happy for the telephone. Like she was dial happy. Like she just loved dialing up like GPs and police and whoever she could just to chat away. And Virginia had called her mother and father's GP 185 times, making appointments, cancelling appointments, rescheduling appointments. She was doing this constantly. Every phone call she made to make an appointment was followed by a phone call to cancel the appointment. And the GPs were becoming very concerned that Lois and John had not been in for checkups or medications. And with all the phone calls of cancelling and making appointments, etc., the GP receptionist, this ultimately raised a red flag with them. They decided to contact the safeguarding team at the Essex County Council to basically request a welfare check done because they were concerned about Lois and John's welfare. So the Essex County Council, they decided to contact the police and make them aware of the doctor's concerns, and this ultimately resulted in the police wanting to speak to Lois and John themselves. But of course, they would be greeted by Virginia. The police, they spoke with Virginia on the 13th of September 2023, and she had told them, you know, you can't speak to my mum and dad right now because they're travelling. They will be back in October, but they don't travel with their mobile phone. So unfortunately, I can't even call them for you. And there's the door. Just wanting rid of them. Now, officers, they felt like Virginia was acting very erratic, very secretive, and they felt like they weren't getting the whole story and that there might be something else going on here. When they had went back to the station, they just felt like things weren't adding up. Virginia's story was just all over the place. The police, they're kind of like going back over Virginia's story and telling of, you know, the events that are transpiring. And they're just thinking, you know, this isn't right. Her story is all over the place. How come no one has seen Lois and John for like the best part of four years? Now, what started as a missing persons investigation would very quickly turn into a murder investigation, and a search warrant would be executed on September the 15th of 2023 with the police forcing entry into the McCullough home and arresting Virginia McCullough. But the police had absolutely no idea just what had happened within those four walls. Now, on this occasion, with this police visit, McCullough, she was very, 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 very forthcoming with information that she had previously withheld, and she admitted that she had murdered both of her parents. She'd even said to the police, I did know that this day would come eventually, and I deserve what's coming sentence-wise. It's the right thing to do, and then maybe that might give me a bit of peace. Yeah, your peace, Virginia hun, is not at the forefront of anyone's mind. I don't give a tiny rat's ass if you have peace or not. So, yeah. And I'm sure you're all very aware of the clip that has gone viral of Virginia McCullough basically trying to have a joke with the detectives, telling them to cheer up, at least you've caught the bad guy. Like, how can you joke? Like, you have murdered your mum and dad and the police have found out and you're joking about the fact that they've caught the bad guy? What? Virginia, she tells the police that she poisoned her own father and also brutally bludgeoned her own mother to death. She tells them about the murder weapon. She explains that there was a hammer and also the large knife. She told them where to find it. She even said that the hammer would still have blood on it as well from Lois. Then Virginia gave a very detailed description about where her mum and dad's bodies were. Now, Virginia McCullough, she would be charged on 2 counts of murder and she would be put in front of the magistrates on the 18th of September before then being remanded in custody. Then on September the 29th, she would appear in Basildon Crown Court via video link, and the video link was basically her in Peterborough prison and then it being broadcasted to Basildon Crown Court. Why am I mansplaining that? I think it's pretty clear what a video link is. I'm sorry, I don't know why I did that. But Judge Samantha Lee, she would set her plea hearing date for December the 1st. So December the 1st rolls around and Virginia McCullough, she would appear in Chelmsford Crown Court this time, again via video link from prison. But she didn't enter a plea at this time because her defence had basically argued that they needed longer to prepare reports from witness experts. With this being said, the judge had then set the next hearing for February the 5th of 2024, but given them a deadline to prepare their reports by February the 1st of 2024. So on the 9th of February, Virginia, she appeared in court yet again, like she's becoming a regular here, and then she was further remanded in custody pending another hearing in March. And then finally, on March the 1st of 2024, the judge had set a trial date for October the 7th. However, they wouldn't need this. On July the 4th, Virginia McCullough, she would enter a plea of guilty to both the murders of Lois and John, and then the judge had set in place her sentencing date for October the 10th of 2024. I should say it wasn't like set in stone for that date, it was like scheduled to begin on October the 10th, but the actual hearing would take place on October the 11th. So for the sentencing hearing, it had Lucy Weldon, who was acting on behalf of the prosecution, and then Christine Agnew, who was acting as part of the defence. So the prosecution, they're trying to give an overview of who Virginia McCullough is as a person, and they talk about the fact that she engaged in fraudulent activities and stealing from her family long before these murders even took place. She was always driven by stealing their money. She had even stated that after the murders, the only thing that Virginia McCullough was concerned with was deceiving the outside world to where her parents actually were. Weldon had also told the court that she continued to spend her father and mother's pension, and she spent it in any way that she wanted. There was also call transcripts of Virginia masquerading as her father, and also evidence of her opening up credit accounts under her mum and dad's names. The court would also be told about the B&Q order that Virginia had placed 2 days after the murder, which included sharp sand, cement, 40 of those building block things we were talking about. There was also Gorilla Tape, as well as a stepladder. Christine Agnew, who was acting for the defence, she had basically said that Virginia McCullough was her parents' primary caregiver, and she had a lot on her plate because they had mental illnesses and physical illnesses, and she was the one who was having to carry the burden of looking after them every single day, and apparently she felt trapped. Well, get a carer and then leave. Christine Agnew had then told the court about the diagnosis that Virginia McCullough had received of anxiety and autism. Now, she had said, I'm not saying this excuses what she did, but in some way it does explain why she did what she did. Does it though? I don't think anxiety and autism come hand in hand with murder. Correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, Virginia McCullough, she tried to claim that both of her parents, especially her mother, had been heavily abusive toward her in her childhood and her adulthood, all the way through her life. Now, her own siblings would come forward and tell the court that she was a compulsive liar and that these disgusting lies she was telling, she was trying to ruin the memory of John and Lois. They called it a disgusting misrepresentation of their family, and they were absolutely enraged by her. They felt like she was this evil human being who they didn't even know. Christine Agnew, she also told the court that Virginia McCullough, she had very quickly admitted to the murders to save her family any further distress. How kind of her. Listen, don't forget the fact that she covered it up for 4 years and she brutally murdered both of her parents in cold blood. But oh, she admitted to it 4 years later when the police came barging through her door. So Virginia McCullough, she would be sentenced to life imprisonment, and the judge had ordered that she would have to spend a total of 36 years at the very least just to be considered for parole. The judge had told her that she had completely robbed her parents of any dignity in their death, and that her conduct was a gross violation of the trust that should exist between parents and their children. That means that Virginia McCullough, she will not be eligible for parole until 2059, and it's also worth mentioning as well that her, mental illness diagnosis, that was basically ruled as not reducing her culpability for her actions. So she was completely within her right mind whilst committing these actions, and she knew exactly what she was doing before because it was premeditated, and after, considering she covered it up for 4 years. Now, just before we do close off this video today, I do just want to do the 360 that we always do, bring it right back to the victims, and that is Lois and John McCullough. Their family have given statements about the kind of people they were, how much they were loved, how much they were adored by their family, by their children. These two individuals are missed every single day. And this family, the overwhelming sense of guilt that they have for not realising that something was wrong sooner, eats away at them. But how were they to know? And I know people will say, well, how could it be 4 years and people don't know? You just don't know the dynamics of a family. Some families aren't always that close physically. It's more that connection that they share with each other. I know it's easy to sit and judge and, have quick opinions, but we need to remember everyone is different. Everyone's family life is different. People connect and bond in different ways, and that's not always going to be through seeing someone all the time on the regular. What I also want you to remember in that regard is Virginia, she was known to be a master manipulator. She could manipulate anyone into believing anything. Like, this was her talent. Police said this, the judge said it, everyone that knew her knew that she was an amazing manipulator. She's done it her whole life. Lois and John McCullough, they kept to themselves, but they had their life that they were happy with, and they were friendly and polite to everyone. Even Lois, who really struggled with socialising, she was known to be nice, she was polite. And I do think the loss of Lois and John has hit the community really hard, but more specifically, has just shattered their family. Their family's hearts are broken into pieces. And to know as well that it was their own relative that could do this completely shatters them. And that entire family, they have to now live knowing what exactly happened to Lois and John in the moments before their death and even the years after their death. So please send this family all the love and prayers that you possibly can. And I am absolutely sending love and prayer to everyone who knew and loved Lois and John. And I'm sending love their way as well, because no one should have had to face what they did. My loves, that is the end of another true crime and makeup video. I really hope this one was interesting for you. I know you've been wanting this one ever since the case kind of went widespread. So I wanted to jump in and cover it as quick as I could, but it did take me a while to gather all the information that I wanted to make sure was included. If you do enjoy my content, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Put the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, which is twice a week, every single week on a Wednesday and Sunday. I know this one is all over the place, but I'm currently moving house, which, if you've done it, is, well, I wasn't prepared for it, let's just say, and I'm running on sawdust, or just like dust in the air, I don't know. I'm still alive, but I'm barely breathing. Me right now. But please subscribe. I am very consistent. You guys know this, but if you're new here, I'm very consistent. I post every single week on the days that I say I will, but life is just life in this week, and I have a full-time job, so it's tough out there, kids. Don't forget you can leave your case suggestions in the Google Doc link, which is in my bio, or at least it should be. If it's not, please tell me off in the comments below. You can also leave them in the comments below or send them over to my email, but I will say, if you really want a case to be recommended, please send it to the Google Doc, because I am having so much issues with my email. I've told you this before, but some emails are coming through, some aren't. If you're interested in anything that I've used on my face today, all the details will be linked down below for you to purchase if you wish. They're not affiliate links. I don't make any money off them whatsoever. I just link them all down below. So if you want to buy them, you can. I hope you're all having a lovely, lovely week so far. Please, please, please be a good person. Do not be a bad person. Stay safe. Look after each other. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.